When someone mentions Antarctica, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Endless white snow? Emperor penguins huddling against blizzards? Maybe a lonely research station fighting minus 60-degree temperatures? Well, here's something that'll blow your mind. There was a time when Antarctica looked more like the Amazon rainforest than a frozen desert. And I'm not talking about some small temperature change. I'm talking about a complete change that would make even Mother Nature do a double take. Picture this. Thick tropical forests stretching as far as the eye can see, with palm trees swaying in warm breezes, rivers flowing freely through green valleys, dinosaurs stomping through fern-filled areas, crocodiles lying on sunny riverbanks. Yeah, crocodiles. In Antarctica. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't some crazy dream or science fiction story. This was Antarctica's reality for hundreds of millions of years. And the story of how it changed from a green paradise into Earth's most difficult place to live is both amazing and heartbreaking. It's a tale of continents moving, climate disaster, and mass extinction. So buckle up, because we're about to take a journey back in time to when Antarctica was the place to be. If you didn't mind sharing your neighborhood with terror birds the size of bears and penguins taller than NBA players. Let's start with the basics. Antarctica hasn't always been at the bottom of the world, playing the role of Earth's walk-in freezer. During the Permian period, about 280 million years ago, Antarctica was actually part of a massive supercontinent called Gondwana, joined up with what would become South America, Africa, India, and Australia. And parts of it were located as far north as the tropics. That's right, Antarctica was once chilling at the same distances from the equator where you'd find Brazil or northern Australia today. During this time, the landscape would have been completely different. Instead of ice sheets miles thick, you'd find river systems, lakes, and varied land covered in the main plant life of the time: seed ferns, conifers, and those weird ancient plants that looked like giant bottle brushes. The Permian period Antarctica was home to some seriously strange creatures. Ever heard of Lystrosaurus? This chubby pig-like reptile with tiny tusks was one of the most successful animals of its time, and its fossils have been found across Antarctica. These guys were about the size of a large dog, plant-eating, and apparently tough as nails. They'd later become one of the few large animals to survive the Permian extinction, the biggest mass extinction in Earth's history that made the dinosaur extinction look like a minor problem. Alongside Lystrosaurus, you had other therapsids, the group that would eventually give rise to mammals. Antarctica was crawling with these early mammals, including predators like the gorgonopsids. Picture a creature with the body of a wolf, the head of a crocodile, and saber teeth that would make a saber-toothed cat jealous. These were the top predators of their time, and they hunted through Antarctic forests that would have looked alien to our eyes. The plants of Permian Antarctica were equally strange. The landscape was dominated by Glossopteris, a seed fern that could grow up to 30 feet tall. These weren't just typical ferns. They had woody trunks and made seeds, making them more like trees than the ferns we know today. In fact, Glossopteris fossils are so common in Antarctica that they helped prove the theory of continental drift. When scientists found identical fossils in South America, Africa, India, and Australia, they realized these continents must have once been connected. During the Triassic period, around 240 million years ago, it became home to some of the earliest dinosaurs and their relatives. We're talking about creatures like Cryolophosaurus, whose name literally means frozen crested lizard. Though ironically, this 20-foot-long predator lived in anything but frozen conditions. This bad boy hunted in forests where temperatures rarely dropped below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, making it more of a mildly chilly on occasion crested lizard. What made Cryolophosaurus special was a crest running across its skull, kind of like a pompadour made of bone. Scientists think this might have been used for display, possibly to attract mates or scare rivals. Imagine a T-Rex cousin with Elvis hair, and you're getting close. The crest was so distinctive that when it was first discovered, scientists nicknamed it Elvisaurus. The Triassic Antarctic ecosystem was surprisingly diverse. Besides Cryolophosaurus, we found evidence of prosauropods, the ancestors of the long-necked giants that would dominate the Jurassic. These early versions were smaller, maybe 10 to 15 feet long, and could probably walk on either 2 or 4 legs. They were the vegans of the Triassic, eating conifers and ferns while trying to avoid becoming Cryolophosaurus food. The Jurassic period saw Antarctica really hit its stride as dinosaur real estate. The continent was positioned around 60 degrees south, still pretty far down, but nowhere near its current polar position. The global climate was significantly warmer, with no polar ice caps anywhere on Earth. Antarctica's average yearly temperature was around 55 to 60 Fahrenheit, similar to modern-day Seattle or London, but without the constant drizzle and sadness. You had long-necked sauropods eating conifer trees that could grow over 100 feet tall. One of these giants was Glacialosaurus, an early sauropod whose name means frozen lizard, another ironic name given that it lived in a warm, forested environment. These creatures could reach lengths of 20 to 25 feet and spent their days stripping plants from trees like oversized, scaly giraffes. But Glacialosaurus was just a baby compared to what was coming. By the Middle Jurassic, true giants had arrived in Antarctica. Footprints suggest sauropods over 60 feet long were stomping around, their massive weight supported by the rich plant life. These titans needed to eat hundreds of pounds of plant matter every day, and Antarctic forests were more than happy to provide. Fast predators hunted through the bushes. We found teeth and bones suggesting the presence of allosaur-like predators, though most remain unnamed due to incomplete fossils. These hunters would have been the terror of the Antarctic Jurassic, reaching lengths of 25 to 30 feet and armed with teeth like steak knives. But the real party started during the Cretaceous period, roughly 145 to 66 million years ago. This is when Antarctica reached peak greenness. Average temperatures climbed to around 65 to 70 Fahrenheit, with some regions possibly hitting 75 Fahrenheit or higher. To put that in perspective, that's warmer than modern-day San Francisco. The continent was covered in mild rainforests, dominated by southern beech trees, ferns, and the newly evolved flowering plants that were taking the world by storm. The Cretaceous brought an explosion of new plant life to Antarctica. For the first time, flowers bloomed across the continent. Early magnolias, their large white flowers standing out against dark green leaves, would have been a common sight. Early relatives of modern buttercups covered forest clearings. Even early grasses were beginning to appear, though they wouldn't dominate landscapes for millions of years yet. The animal life during this period was absolutely crazy. We found evidence of massive titanosaurs, those long-necked giants that could reach lengths of over 60 feet. There were ankylosaurs, basically walking tanks with clubbed tails that could probably total your car with a single swing. Hypsilophodonts, small nimble plant eaters, darted through the forest undergrowth like oversized rabbits with attitude problems. These little guys were the Cretaceous equivalent of deer, quick and alert, always ready to run at the first sign of danger, and they had good reason to be nervous. Recent fossil discoveries suggest they lived in burrows, possibly to escape both predators and the long, dark Antarctic winters, which, while not freezing, would still have meant months of reduced sunlight. The predators of Cretaceous Antarctica were nothing to sneeze at. We found evidence of megaraptorans. These hunters had arms that were unusually long for theropods, ending in hands equipped with sickle-shaped claws up to 14 inches long. They likely used these weapons to slash at prey, causing massive bleeding and trauma. One species, tentatively called the Antarctic demon, may have reached lengths of 30 feet. The Cretaceous seas were teeming with life that would give modern marine biologists nightmares. Plesiosaurs with necks longer than school buses cruised the coastal waters. The Antarctic species Aristonectes had one of the most ridiculous body plans ever evolved, a neck that made up over half its total body length, attached to a body no bigger than a walrus. It probably used this absurd anatomy to sneak up on schools of fish, its tiny head appearing harmless until it was too late. Mosasaurs, basically the ocean's version of a nightmare with fins, ruled as top predators. Kaikai-Falu, discovered in Antarctica, was a monster even by mosasaur standards. At over 30 feet long, with a skull packed with teeth the size of bananas, it was the southern hemisphere's answer to Tyrannosaurus rex, except it lived in the water and was arguably even more terrifying. Its name means "from the soul of the sea" in the language of the indigenous Mapuche people, which seems fitting for such a scary predator. The pterosaurs, those flying reptiles, often mistaken for dinosaurs, were well represented too. Antarctic skies were patrolled by everything from tiny insect eaters with 3-foot wingspans to giants that could rival small planes. One incomplete fossil suggests the presence of an Ajdarchide pterosaur, the group that included Quetzalcoatlus. If confirmed, this would mean pterosaurs with 30-foot wingspans were soaring over Antarctic forests. But perhaps the most mind-blowing residents were the early mammals. Yes, even during the age of dinosaurs, small furry creatures scurried through Antarctic forests. These weren't much to look at. Most were shrew-sized insect eaters, trying not to become someone's snack. But they represented the future of Antarctic wildlife in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. Recent discoveries suggest some had developed gliding membranes, like modern flying squirrels, allowing them to escape predators by taking to the air. Then came the asteroid, you know the one, that cosmic bowling ball that turned Earth into a temporary hellscape 66 million years ago. When that space rock slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula, it didn't just ruin the dinosaurs' day, it sent shockwaves around the entire planet. Antarctica, despite being on the opposite side of the world, got absolutely hammered. First came the heat pulse, a wave of superheated air that would have flash-fried anything caught in the open. Forest fires raged across the continent, turning millions of years of built-up plant matter into ash within hours. Then the earthquakes, possibly triggering volcanic activity in Antarctica's own volcanic regions. The Antarctic Peninsula, volcanically active even then, might have erupted in response to the global seismic chaos. Tsunamis hundreds of feet high would have destroyed coastal areas. Given Antarctica's extensive coastline, this would have wiped out entire ecosystems in minutes. Marine reptiles, coastal dinosaurs, and near-shore communities would have been destroyed by walls of water carrying debris from half a world away. But the real killer was what came next. Darkness. The impact threw so much debris into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun for months, maybe even years. Temperatures dropped globally. Plants died without sunlight. Plant eaters starved. Meat eaters had nothing left to hunt. It was ecological collapse on a scale that makes modern climate change look like a mild inconvenience. In Antarctica, the effects were particularly severe. The continent's position meant it already experienced months of reduced sunlight during winter. Add in the impact winter, and you had darkness that lasted far longer than anywhere else on Earth. The lush forests that had thrived for millions of years died in the never-ending twilight. Welcome to the Paleogene period, specifically the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, spanning from about 66 to 34 million years ago. This was Antarctica's Golden Age. The recovery started slowly. First came the ferns and mosses, those disaster plants that always seem to thrive after catastrophes. Then came the conifers, spreading from whatever seed banks had survived. But what really transformed Antarctica was the rise of the angiosperms, flowering plants that would come to dominate the continent like never before. During the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, about 56 million years ago, global temperatures spiked dramatically. Carbon dioxide levels soared to over 1,000 parts per million, more than double today's levels. The cause is still debated, but the effects were unmistakable. Global temperatures rose by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius in just a few thousand years. For Antarctica, still connected to South America via a land bridge, this meant average temperatures of 75 to 80 Fahrenheit. The coastlines were lined with palm trees, but not just any palms. These were cold-adapted species that could handle the months of darkness during Antarctic winter. They grew alongside relatives of modern baobab trees, creating a landscape that would look more at home in Madagascar than at the bottom of the world. The interior supported dense rainforests that put the Amazon to shame. Multi-layered canopies created complex vertical ecosystems. Emergent trees towered 150 feet above the forest floor. Below them, a dense canopy blocked most sunlight. Underneath that, shade-tolerant trees and giant tree ferns created a twilight world. And, on the forest floor, in constant gloom, specialized plants evolved to capture what little light filtered through. This is when Antarctica's animal life got seriously weird. Remember those terror birds I mentioned? Picture a bird standing 8 feet tall, with a head the size of a horse's, and a beak that could snap your femur like a pretzel stick. These were the forest rasids. and they were the undisputed rulers of Antarctic land ecosystems. These nightmare chickens had evolved in South America and crossed into Antarctica via the land bridge. With powerful legs built for speed, they could run down prey at 30 to 40 miles per hour. Their primary hunting method? Chase something down, pin it with massive clawed feet, and then use that pickaxe of a beak to deliver the final blow. The specific Antarctic terror bird, though still unnamed, left footprints that suggest it was one of the largest of its kind. We're talking about a bird that weighed 300 to 400 pounds and could look a modern human in the eye while standing flat-footed. Its beak alone was over a foot long and shaped like a meat cleaver. But terror birds weren't the only South American immigrants making Antarctica home. The continent hosted a bizarre collection of mammals that seemed like they were designed by committee. There were let-up-turns. Imagine if a horse, a camel, and an anteater had a baby, and that baby was raised by tapirs. Some, like Tetramarohenus, had weird trunk-like noses that they probably used to grab plants or impress potential mates. The astropothers deserve special mention because they were just so weird. Picture a creature with the body of a rhino, the teeth of a hippo, and tusks that grew continuously throughout their lives. Some species had tusks so large they had to develop special notches in their skulls just to fit them when their mouths were closed. They looked like someone tried to build a mammal using spare parts from other animals and got a bit carried away. The nochungulates were perhaps the most successful group. These uniquely South American mammals filled every plant-eating niche imaginable. Some were rabbit-sized and probably hopped. Others reached the size of rhinos. One Antarctic species appears to have developed semi-aquatic adaptations, with eyes and nostrils positioned high on its head like a hippo. It probably spent its days wallowing in Antarctic rivers, which, given the climate, must have been quite pleasant. The marsupials were having their own evolutionary party. Before they became synonymous with Australia, marsupials were living it up in Antarctica. The continent served as their highway from South America to Australia, but many decided to stay. We found fossils of ancient possums that probably lived much like their modern descendants, nocturnal, omnivorous, and surprisingly adaptable. And the penguins, modern emperor penguins, impressive as they are at 4 feet tall, were basically the hobbits of the Antarctic penguin world. During the Eocene, species like Anthropornis stood nearly 7 feet tall and weighed over 200 pounds. But Anthropornis wasn't even the biggest. Paleontology, discovered more recently, may have stood over 7 feet tall and weighed 250 pounds. These mega penguins didn't huddle for warmth. They lived in a world where the biggest challenge was avoiding becoming lunch for the local marine predators. They had proportionally longer beaks than modern penguins, possibly for spearing larger prey. Their wings, while still flippers, were more robust, suggesting they were powerful swimmers capable of diving to incredible depths. The seas around Eocene Antarctica were absolutely terrifying. You had basilosaurids, early whales that looked more like sea serpents than modern whales. The Antarctic species reached lengths of 50 feet or more. Unlike modern whales, they had different types of teeth. Pointed ones in front for catching prey, serrated ones in back for slicing. They were pursuit predators, chasing down everything from fish to other marine mammals. The most unsettling marine residents were the crocodiles. Marine crocodiles that could grow over 20 feet long patrolled the coasts and estuaries. These weren't your garden variety gators. These were ocean-going monsters that could take down pretty much anything that ventured too close to the water. Fossil armor plates suggest some reached sizes comparable to the largest modern saltwater crocodiles, but with adaptations for a more marine lifestyle. The sharks of Eocene Antarctica deserve their own horror movie. Over 20 species have been identified from teeth alone. You had early makos, primitive great whites, and various other sharks. But the real monsters were the ottodontids, the family that would eventually produce the megalodon. Around 34 million years ago, the party ended. The Drake Passage opened fully, allowing the Antarctic circumpolar current to form. This oceanic conveyor belt isolated Antarctica thermally, preventing warm waters from reaching its shores. Combined with declining CO2 levels, this triggered a cascade of cooling that would transform the continent forever. The first ice sheets formed in the continental interior. Plants began dying back from the highest elevations. Animals that could migrate did so. Those that couldn't faced extinction. The lush forests contracted to the coasts, then to protected valleys, then disappeared entirely. Within a few million years, one of Earth's most biodiverse continents had become its most barren. Today, when we drill through Antarctic ice, we sometimes find pieces of that lost world: fossilized wood, leaf impressions, ancient pollen. Each fragment tells the story of a time when Antarctica was alive in ways we can barely imagine. It's a sobering reminder that our planet's climate can change dramatically, and that what seems permanent is merely a moment in geological time.